The paralyzed millionaire only stopped to buy some lemonade, but the 6-year-old boy offers his cure. "I can make you walk again." The millionaire laughs, and then everything changes. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the black asphalt as Richard Hawthorne's custom wheelchair-accessible Bentley glided through the quiet suburbs of Austin. At 62, Richard had grown accustomed to the stares, the whispered conversations, and the carefully constructed world that money could buy. A world where his paralyzed legs were simply another problem to be managed by his team of assistants. "Sir, we're running 15 minutes behind schedule," his driver Marcus announced through the intercom, glancing nervously at the rearview mirror. Richard's board meeting with the hospital investors couldn't wait. His pharmaceutical empire depended on it. "Take the shortcut through Maple Street," Richard commanded, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd built a billion-dollar company from nothing. But as they turned the corner, something unexpected caught his eye. A small wooden stand sat beneath a massive oak tree, painted in cheerful yellow and blue stripes. A hand-painted sign read, "Tommy's Lemonade, $1 for Hope." Behind the counter stood a boy who couldn't have been more than 6 years old, his sandy brown hair catching the sunlight, wearing a Superman t-shirt that had seen better days. "Stop the car," Richard said suddenly. Marcus hesitated. "Sir, the meeting—" "I said stop the car." Something about the scene tugged at Richard's chest, a feeling he'd buried deep after the accident 5 years ago. Maybe it was the boy's earnest smile, or perhaps the way he stood so confidently despite being alone. Richard hadn't stopped for anything unscheduled in years. The boy looked up as the expensive car pulled over, his bright blue eyes widening with innocent curiosity rather than the calculating interest Richard usually saw. No recognition, no knowing glances at his wheelchair-bound silhouette visible through the tinted windows. "Would you like some lemonade, mister?" the boy called out cheerfully, as Marcus opened the door and began unfolding Richard's wheelchair. "It's really good. I made it myself with my grandma's secret recipe." Richard wheeled himself closer, studying the child's face. There was something different about this boy, an unusual stillness as if he carried wisdom far beyond his years. "What's your name, son?" "Tommy," the boy replied, pouring fresh lemonade into a plastic cup. "Tommy Chen. Are you sad, mister?" The question caught Richard off guard. In his world, people asked about his business, his investments, his latest acquisitions. No one ever asked if he was sad. "Why would you think that?" Richard asked, accepting the cup. Tommy tilted his head thoughtfully. "Your eyes look like my grandpa's did before he got better. Heavy, like they're carrying something too big." He paused, then added with startling certainty, "I can make you walk again." Richard nearly choked on his lemonade. The audacity of it. This child, this stranger, offering him the one thing his millions couldn't buy. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "I can make you walk again," Tommy repeated simply, as if he'd offered to tie Richard's shoes. "But you have to really want it, not the walking part. Everyone wants that. You have to want to be different than you are right now." Richard stared at the boy, his rational mind rejecting the absurd claim entirely. He'd consulted with the world's best neurologists, tried experimental treatments, invested in cutting-edge research. His spinal cord had been severed completely. There was no coming back from that. But as Tommy reached across the small wooden counter and placed his tiny hand on Richard's wrist, something extraordinary happened. A warmth spread up Richard's arm, not burning but gentle, like sunlight breaking through clouds. And for the first time in 5 years, Richard felt something he'd thought was lost forever. A tingling sensation in his left leg. "What the hell?" Richard gasped, staring down at his motionless limbs. Tommy smiled knowingly. "Tomorrow, same time. Come back tomorrow, and I'll show you something that will change everything." Richard spent the entire sleepless night in his mahogany-paneled study, surrounded by towering stacks of medical journals and research papers. The leather-bound volumes of neurological studies lay open across his antique desk, their pages filled with highlighted passages about spinal cord injuries, nerve regeneration, and the limits of human healing. The tingling sensation in his leg had lasted only minutes, but it haunted him like a phantom limb in reverse, feeling where there should be nothing, hope where there should be only acceptance. His rational mind, honed by decades of cutthroat business decisions and careful scientific investments, grasped desperately for any logical explanation. Phantom limb syndrome, psychological responses triggered by desperate wishful thinking, even elaborate hoaxes involving hidden electrical stimulation devices. He researched every possibility with the thoroughness of a man whose empire was built on information and analysis. But as dawn light filtered through his study windows, casting long shadows across the scattered papers, the memory of that impossible warmth spreading through his dead nerves refused to be dismissed by logic or rationalization. Something had happened at that lemonade stand. Something that defied everything he understood about medicine, science, and the immutable laws of human biology. By sunrise, he'd made a decision that would have seemed insane to him 24 hours earlier. He would return to the boy, but this time with Dr. Amanda Walsh, his personal physician and the head of neurology at Austin Medical Center. If something truly impossible was happening, he needed a medical witness, someone whose credibility and expertise couldn't be questioned by skeptics or his own desperate imagination. "Richard, this is absolutely insane," Dr. Walsh protested as Marcus navigated the Bentley through the quiet Austin suburbs. Her wire-rimmed glasses reflected the morning sunlight as she shook her head in disbelief. "You're chasing fairy tales based on a child's outrageous claim and a momentary sensation that could have been caused by anything from stress to medication interactions. Amanda, you've known me for 15 years. Have I ever struck you as someone who chases fairy tales?" Richard's voice carried the weight of a man who'd built a pharmaceutical empire on rigorous scientific methodology. "No, but you've also never been this desperate for a miracle," she replied gently, her tone softening with compassion. "Richard, I understand what you're going through. The hope, the desperation, the willingness to believe in anything that might give you back what you've lost. But false hope can be more damaging than honest acceptance. 5 minutes of your time, Amanda. Either prove me wrong or witness something that could change everything we think we know about healing." "Doctor." Walsh adjusted her glasses and sighed, her skepticism evident in every line of her professionally composed face. "Fine. But when this turns out to be nothing more than a placebo effect and childhood imagination, you're funding my spinal cord regeneration research for the next 5 years. "Deal," Richard said, though his heart pounded with an anticipation that felt dangerously close to faith. Tommy was waiting at his lemonade stand when they arrived, as if he'd never left his post through the long night. The yellow and blue stripes looked freshly painted in the clear morning sunlight, and the hand-lettered sign reading, "Tommy's Lemonade, $1 for Hope," seemed to glow with its own internal light. But the boy himself appeared somehow different, older, more serious, his bright blue eyes holding a sadness and wisdom that seemed far too deep and complex for someone so young. "You brought a doctor," Tommy observed, his voice carrying none of yesterday's childlike enthusiasm and innocent joy. "I needed to be sure about what happened yesterday," Richard admitted, studying the boy's face for any sign of deception or performance. "Dr. Walsh specializes in spinal cord injuries. She's one of the most respected neurologists in the country." Tommy nodded slowly, his small hands gripping the edge of his wooden counter with unusual intensity. "She doesn't believe. I can feel it from here like a cold wall between us. That's going to make this much harder and more dangerous." "Make what harder?" Dr. Walsh demanded, her professional demeanor clashing with the increasingly surreal nature of the situation. Instead of answering immediately, Tommy walked around the counter with deliberate, measured steps that seemed far too purposeful for a 6-year-old child. Today, he moved differently, with the careful precision of someone much older, someone who understood the weight of responsibility and the cost of extraordinary gifts. He approached Richard's wheelchair without hesitation, his small frame casting a long shadow in the morning light. "I need you to watch his legs very carefully, Dr. Walsh," Tommy said, his voice carrying an unusual gravity that made the air around them seem to thicken with anticipation. "Watch them with all your medical training, all your scientific knowledge. And please don't let your disbelief interfere with what you're about to witness." "Child, I've been a neurologist for 20 years, Dr. Walsh replied, her tone mixing professional authority with growing unease. I've seen every type of spinal cord injury, every possible recovery pattern. I know what's medically possible and what exists only in the realm of wishful thinking. Do you? Tommy asked, his innocent question carrying layers of meaning that made Dr. Walsh unconsciously step closer. Then please, explain this to me afterwards. Without further warning, Tommy knelt beside Richard's wheelchair and placed his small hands on the businessman's knees. The moment his palms made contact with the expensive fabric of Richard's trousers, the world around them seemed to shift into something beyond normal reality. The warmth came immediately, but this time it was accompanied by something that made Dr. Walsh's breath catch in her throat and her scientific worldview begin to crumble. A faint, golden light seemed to emanate from Tommy's hands, flowing into Richard's legs like liquid sunlight captured in human form. It wasn't dramatic or supernatural looking in the way of movie special effects. Rather, it appeared organic, natural, like the soft glow of a sunset filtering through healthy skin. But what happened next defied everything Dr. Walsh knew about neurological science, spinal cord anatomy, and the fundamental limitations of human healing. Richard's right foot began to move, not just a random twitch or involuntary spasm, but deliberate, controlled movement that spoke of neural pathways functioning where none should exist. His toes wiggled purposefully inside his expensive Italian leather shoes. Then his ankle rotated in a slow, perfect circle. Doctor. Walsh watched in stunned, speechless amazement as his left leg joined the impossible symphony of motion. That's medically impossible, she breathed, her scientific training warring violently with the undeniable evidence before her eyes. The spinal cord is completely severed at the L2 vertebra. There's no neural pathway for voluntary movement, no conceivable way for the brain to communicate with the lower extremities. She stopped mid-sentence, her words dying in her throat as Richard's legs began to straighten with obvious purpose and strength. His quadriceps muscles tensed and released in coordinated patterns, his calves flexed with definition that spoke of neural control, and for 30 incredible, impossible seconds, his legs moved with the smooth coordination of a completely healthy person. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the miracle ended. Tommy collapsed to the sidewalk like a marionette, whose strings had been cut all at once, his small body crumpling with frightening suddenness. The golden light vanished instantly, leaving only the ordinary morning sun and the sound of Dr. Walsh's medical training taking over. She dropped to her knees beside the unconscious boy, her hands automatically checking pulse points and breathing patterns with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent decades responding to medical emergencies. Rapid heartbeat, shallow breathing, signs of severe exhaustion and possible shock, she muttered, her fingers finding the weak but steady pulse in Tommy's tiny wrist. His body temperature is dropping rapidly. We need to get him to a hospital immediately. No, Tommy whispered, his voice barely audible as he struggled to sit up against the overwhelming weakness. I'm okay. This happens sometimes. I just need a moment to recover. What happens? Richard demanded, his voice sharp with alarm at the boy's deathly pale complexion and the way his small body trembled uncontrollably. When people don't believe, when they resist the healing, it takes much more out of me, Tommy explained, his breathing gradually returning to a more normal rhythm. The doubt and disbelief fight against the healing energy, makes it expensive, makes it dangerous. Doctor. Walsh stared at the boy in complete, overwhelming amazement, her entire worldview crumbling and reforming in real time. I've never seen anything like this in my entire career. The muscle responses, the coordinated neural activity, the apparent regeneration of damaged tissue. It defies everything we understand about spinal cord injuries and neurological function. Dr. Walsh couldn't sleep that night. She paced her downtown apartment like a caged animal, her mind racing with possibilities and implications that threatened to overwhelm her carefully constructed understanding of medical science. Coffee cups accumulated on her kitchen counter as she worked through the night, reviewing every medical journal, every research paper about unexplained recoveries, spontaneous healing, and neurological regeneration she could access through her hospital's extensive database. The boy's demonstration had shaken her scientific worldview to its absolute core, but more than that, it had ignited a spark of hope and possibility she hadn't felt since her early days in medical school, when she'd believed that medicine could truly work miracles. The scientific literature was sparse but intriguing. Scattered reports of miraculous recoveries that defied conventional explanation, usually dismissed by the medical establishment as misdiagnosis, placebo effects, or simple wishful thinking. But what if they weren't? What if there were forces at work in human healing that science simply hadn't yet learned to measure or understand? Her phone rang at 11:47 p.m., jarring her from her research. Richard's number appeared on the screen. "Amanda, I need you to run every diagnostic test you can think of on me. MRI, CT scan, nerve conduction studies, electromyography, spinal tap if necessary. Everything in your entire diagnostic arsenal. Richard, it's nearly midnight. Whatever you're feeling can wait until morning." "No, it can't. I'll pay for the entire night shift staff. Double overtime for everyone involved, triple if necessary." His voice carried an urgency that made her stomach tighten with apprehension. "I need to understand what's happening to my body, and I need that understanding right now, tonight." 3 hours later, Dr. Walsh stared at the test results spread across her office desk, her hands shaking slightly as she compared them to Richard's extensive previous medical records. The MRI images showed something that simply shouldn't exist in medical reality: microscopic threads of nervous tissue growing like delicate, impossible spider webs around the site of his spinal cord injury. "This is completely impossible," she murmured, adjusting her glasses and leaning closer to the illuminated scans. "Neural regeneration at this level, this speed, this degree of organization, it's beyond anything we've ever documented in medical literature." "But it's happening," Richard said from the examination table, his voice filled with equal parts wonder and deep apprehension. "The question is, what do we do with this knowledge, Doctor?" Walsh set down the scans and looked at him directly, her scientific curiosity warring with her medical ethics. "Richard, we need to find that boy, study him properly, systematically, understand how this works on a cellular, molecular level. He's not a laboratory specimen, Amanda. He's a child. He's a living miracle walking around in a 6-year-old's body. Think about what this could mean for millions of people with spinal cord injuries, paralysis, degenerative neurological disorders, conditions we've always considered hopeless." Her voice grew more excited with each word. "If we could understand his ability, map it scientifically, perhaps even replicate it through pharmaceutical intervention." Richard held up his hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "Before we start planning to turn the boy into a research subject, maybe we should actually talk to him. Learn what he wants, what he needs, what this extraordinary gift is costing him personally." The next morning they returned to the lemonade stand together, both carrying the weight of sleepless nights and revolutionary possibilities. Tommy was there, but he looked dramatically different, exhausted with dark circles under his young eyes and a pallor that spoke of something essential being drained from within his small body. "You ran tests on yourself," Tommy said without preamble, not even bothering with his usual cheerful greeting. "So you saw the new pathways growing in your spine." Dr. Walsh nearly dropped her coffee cup, her scientific mind reeling at the impossible knowledge. "How could you possibly know that?" "I can feel what I fix, the connections I make, the healing I start. They become part of me and I become part of them." Tommy looked directly at Richard with eyes that held ancient wisdom. "You're healing faster than I expected. Your body wants to be whole again. It's fighting to complete what I started." "Is that good or bad?" Richard asked, sensing something ominous in the boy's tone. "It's dangerous," Tommy replied quietly. "Every person I heal leaves a piece of themselves with me, and I leave a piece of myself with them. Too many healings, and I start to lose who I am." Tommy's explanation came slowly, as if each word required careful consideration and caused him physical pain to speak. "Doctor." Walsh had insisted on monitoring his vital signs during their conversation, attaching portable sensors to his small wrists and chest. The readings displayed on her tablet were deeply concerning: erratic heartbeat, fluctuating blood pressure, and brain activity patterns that defied every normal parameter she'd ever studied. "I remember things that aren't mine," Tommy continued, his voice small and vulnerable in a way that made both adults want to protect him. "Dreams that belong to people I've helped. Memories of lives I've never lived, experiences I've never had. Sometimes I wake up and I'm not sure which thoughts are really mine and which belong to someone else. Dr. Walsh leaned forward, her scientific training warring with maternal instincts she didn't know she possessed. Can you give us a specific example of what you mean? Last night I dreamed about flying a B-17 bomber over Germany in World War II. I felt the controls vibrating in my hands, saw the enemy fighters approaching through clouds of flak, felt the terror and exhilaration of combat. Tommy's young voice carried the weight of experienced trauma. But I've never been in a plane, Dr. Walsh. I've never even left Texas. That memory belongs to Mr. Henderson, the old man whose arthritis I fixed last month. Richard felt a chill run down his newly functional spine. Are you saying you absorb the memories of everyone you heal? Not all of them, just the important ones, the ones that shaped who they are, that made them who they became. Tommy's eyes grew distant and unfocused. Mr. Henderson was a pilot. Flying was everything to him, until his hands got too stiff and painful to trust with aircraft controls. When I fixed his arthritis, I felt his joy at being able to grip things again, but I also felt 50 years of missing the sky, of dreaming about soaring through clouds. Dr. Walsh checked her monitoring equipment, her face growing pale as she processed the readings. Tommy, your neural activity is off the charts. Your brain is processing information at levels that should be impossible for someone your age, or any age for that matter. That's exactly why I need your help, Tommy said, looking at both of them with desperate, pleading hope. I need you to find another way to heal people, a way that doesn't require me to give pieces of myself away until there's nothing left. Another way to do what you do? Richard asked, his business mind already working through possibilities. Yes, because I'm running out of time, and there are still people who need help. Tommy's voice carried a weight of responsibility that seemed crushing for someone so young. But more than that, I need to heal you completely before I can't anymore. Before I lose myself entirely. Dr. Walsh set down her tablet, her full attention focused on the boy. What do you mean you can't anymore? I'm changing with every healing. Every time I help someone, I become a little less Tommy, and a little more everyone I've ever touched. He looked at Richard with urgent, ancient eyes. But you're different. You're supposed to be my final healing, the one that sets me free. Sets you free from what? Richard asked, though he feared the answer. From being stuck between what I am and what I'm becoming. Your healing is special, Mr. Hawthorne. It's connected to something much bigger than both of us, something that goes back to before your accident. Before Richard could ask what he meant, Tommy suddenly stiffened, his young face filled with alarm and fear. Someone's coming. Someone who's been looking for me for a very long time. Through the oak trees lining the street, they could see a black sedan approaching slowly, its tinted windows reflecting the morning sun like dark mirrors. The vehicle moved with deliberate, predatory purpose, and Richard felt an instinctive dread settle in his stomach like a stone. Who is it, Doctor? Walsh asked, unconsciously moving protectively closer to Tommy. People who think they can control what I do, people who want to use my gift for things it was never meant to accomplish. Tommy's voice was barely a whisper. They've been tracking healers like me for years. They want to turn us into weapons. The sedan pulled up to the curb with mechanical precision, its engine purring with the quiet efficiency of government funding. 3 men in identical dark suits emerged with the coordinated movement of a well-trained military unit, their movements synchronized and purposeful. Their leader, a stern man with silver hair and cold grey eyes, approached the lemonade stand with the confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question or hesitation. Tommy Chen, he said, his voice carrying an authority that made the air itself seem to grow heavy with menace. My name is Agent Reynolds. I'm with a specialized government program that focuses on protecting people with your unique and potentially dangerous abilities. Tommy immediately moved behind his lemonade stand, his small hands gripping the wooden counter with white knuckles. I don't want your kind of protection. Son, I don't think you fully understand the situation you're in or the forces you're dealing with. Agent Reynolds's tone remained carefully neutral, but his eyes were calculating. Your abilities have attracted attention from various groups around the world, some with good intentions, others with far less noble purposes. We're here to ensure your safety and the safety of others. Richard wheeled himself between Tommy and the agents, his newly strengthened legs giving him a confidence he hadn't felt in years. And what exactly does this protection entail? Agent Reynolds studied Richard with the analytical gaze of someone trained to assess threats and assets. You must be Richard Hawthorne. We've been monitoring the situation. The boy has been providing you with unauthorized medical treatment using unregistered methods. Unauthorized by whom? Dr. Walsh demanded, stepping forward with the authority of her medical credentials. He's not practicing medicine. He's a child with a natural gift. He's a child with an ability that could revolutionize military medicine, enhance soldier recovery rates, save countless lives in combat zones in ways that conventional medicine cannot. Agent Reynolds never took his eyes off Tommy. With proper training, structure, and support, he could become one of the most valuable assets our country has ever produced. By enslaving a 6-year-old boy, Richard's voice carried the edge of barely controlled anger. By giving him structure, education, proper medical monitoring, and the resources to use his gift responsibly and safely. The boy is clearly struggling with the psychological and physical effects of his ability. He needs professional guidance and medical support that only a government facility can provide. Tommy's voice cut through the tension like a blade. I've heard about your program, Agent Reynolds. Project Prometheus. You don't want to help me. You want to study me, control me, and use me until there's nothing left but an empty shell. Agent Reynolds' carefully neutral expression flickered with genuine surprise. How could you possibly know that classified designation? Because I've healed some of your other test subjects, the ones who escaped, the ones who were dying because of what you did to them. Tommy's young voice carried a fury that made all the adults around him step back involuntarily. I know about the experiments, the forced healings, the way you broke their minds trying to make them into weapons. That's highly classified information, Agent Reynolds said, his hand moving instinctively toward his jacket. It's not classified from me, Tommy replied, his eyes beginning to glow with that same golden light they'd seen during the healings. I can see the connections between all living things, including the connections between people who've been hurt by the same system, the same people. Dr. Walsh grabbed her medical bag, her training sensing the situation spiraling rapidly toward danger. Tommy, you need to calm down. Your vitals are spiking to dangerous levels. But Tommy wasn't listening. The golden light around his eyes was growing brighter, and the air around the lemonade stand began to shimmer with heat that seemed to come from nowhere. You want to know what my gift really is, Agent Reynolds? It's not just healing. It's understanding life force itself, and I can take it away just as easily as I can give it. Agent Reynolds raised his hand, and his two companions immediately flanked the group with military precision. Son, you don't want to threaten federal agents. That's a line you can't uncross. I'm not threatening anyone, Tommy said, his voice eerily calm despite the growing supernatural energy. I'm just showing you what happens when you try to force someone like me to do things they don't want to do. Richard felt the temperature around them drop suddenly, and he realized with growing horror that Tommy wasn't just a healer. He was something far more powerful and potentially dangerous than any of them had imagined. The golden light around Tommy's eyes intensified until it was almost blinding, and Richard felt the air around them crackle with an energy that made his skin tingle with electricity. Dr. Walsh's medical equipment began beeping frantically as readings spiked beyond measurable parameters, and even Agent Reynolds took an involuntary step backward. Tommy, listen to me, Richard said urgently, wheeling closer despite the dangerous energy radiating from the boy. You don't want to hurt anyone. That's not who you are. Isn't it? Tommy's voice had changed, becoming deeper, older, carrying the weight of accumulated lifetimes. I've absorbed the memories of soldiers, Mr. Hawthorne. I know what violence feels like. I know what it means to take a life. Agent Reynolds gestured to his companions, who immediately began reaching for weapons concealed beneath their suits. Stand down, son. You're surrounded and outgunned. Am I? Tommy raised his small hand, and one of the agents suddenly gasped, clutching his chest as his face went pale. I can feel your heartbeat from here. I can feel the blood flowing through your veins. Would you like me to stop it? "Tommy, no!" Dr. Walsh shouted, but her voice seemed to come from very far away. The affected agent collapsed to his knees, his breathing labored and irregular. Agent Reynolds immediately drew his weapon, a sleek black pistol that gleamed menacingly in the morning sunlight. "Release him immediately, or we will use lethal force." "You can't kill me," Tommy said with absolute certainty. "I'm connected to every person I've ever healed. If I die, they die with me, including Mr. Hawthorne." Richard felt his heart skip a beat as the implications sank in. "Tommy, what are you saying?" "The healing isn't just temporary, Mr. Hawthorne. It's permanent because part of me is keeping it alive inside you. If they kill me, your spinal cord will sever again instantly. You'll be back in that wheelchair, but this time you'll be dying." Agent Reynolds' face remained impassive, but Richard could see the calculation in his eyes. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Tommy's smile was cold and far too adult for his young face. "Dr. Walsh, check his neural activity. See what happens when I withdraw my energy." Dr. Walsh looked at her tablet, her face growing pale as she watched Richard's readings fluctuate wildly. "Richard, your nervous system is completely dependent on some kind of external energy source. If that source disappears—" "I'll die," Richard finished, understanding flooding through him. "You've made me dependent on you." "Not on purpose," Tommy said, his voice cracking with genuine emotion. "That's just how the healing works. It's not a cure, it's a symbiosis. I give you life and you give me a reason to keep living." Agent Reynolds lowered his weapon slightly. "This changes things. We can't risk losing a valuable asset like Mr. Hawthorne." "I'm not your asset," Richard said firmly, "and neither is Tommy." Suddenly, the air around them began to shimmer with heat distortion, and Tommy's form started to become translucent. "Dr. Walsh, grab Mr. Hawthorne. We're leaving." "How, Dr.?" Walsh began, but her words were cut off as reality seemed to bend around them. The world dissolved into golden light, and when it reformed, they were standing in Richard's living room. Tommy collapsed immediately, his small body racked with convulsions. "What just happened?" Dr. Walsh demanded, kneeling beside the boy. "I teleported us," Tommy gasped between labored breaths. "But it cost me too much. I'm fading faster now." Richard stared at the boy in amazement and horror. "Tommy, what are you?" "I'm what happens when someone dies but doesn't know how to let go," Tommy replied, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm what happens when love is stronger than death." Tommy's revelation hung in the air like a physical weight as Dr. Walsh frantically checked his vital signs. His pulse was erratic, his breathing shallow, and his skin had taken on an almost translucent quality that made him appear to be fading from existence itself. "I need to tell you the truth," Tommy said, his voice weak but determined. "About what I really am, about why I can do these things." Richard positioned his wheelchair beside the couch where Tommy lay, his newly functional legs trembling with residual energy from their supernatural escape. "Tommy, you need to rest. You've pushed yourself too hard." "There's no time for rest," Tommy replied, his young eyes holding depths of sorrow that seemed infinite. "Agent Reynolds was right about one thing. I am dangerous, but not in the way he thinks." Dr. Walsh looked up from her medical readings, her face filled with concern. "Tommy, your cellular structure is breaking down. Whatever you did to get us here, it's accelerating your deterioration." "I know." Tommy struggled to sit up, his small frame shaking with the effort. "That's why I need to tell you about my mother, my real mother." Richard felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean, your real mother?" "The woman you think is my mother, Sarah Chen. She died 3 years ago in a car accident, but I died with her." Tommy's words fell like stones into still water. "We were driving to the hospital because I was sick, really sick. The doctors said I had maybe days left." Dr. Walsh's tablet slipped from her hands. "That's impossible. You're here. You're alive." "Am I?" Tommy looked at his hands, which seemed to flicker in and out of focus. "My mother was a nurse, Dr. Walsh. She worked in the children's oncology ward. She'd seen so many kids die, and she couldn't bear to watch me go the same way." "What did she do?" Richard asked, though he feared the answer. "She made a deal with something that exists between life and death. She offered her life force, her very essence, to keep me alive. But the exchange wasn't perfect. I lived, but I became something else, something that exists in the space between worlds. Dr. Walsh retrieved her tablet, her scientific mind struggling to process the impossible. That would explain your cellular structure. You're not entirely human anymore. I'm a bridge, Tommy confirmed, between life and death, between what is and what could be. Every person I heal, I pull them a little closer to my side of existence. That's why I can feel their memories, their experiences. They become part of the collective consciousness that keeps me anchored to this world. Richard's mind raced with implications. The government agents, Project Prometheus, they must know what you are. They think they do. They've been hunting beings like me for decades, ever since the first one appeared after World War II. They call us anomalies, children who died but came back changed, enhanced, dangerous. Tommy's voice grew stronger as he spoke, as if the truth itself was giving him energy. But they don't understand the cost. Every miracle comes with a price. What price? Dr. Walsh asked, though she suspected she already knew. The people I heal, they're not just healed, they're connected to me forever. If I die, they die with me. If I suffer, they suffer. I'm not just saving lives, I'm collecting them. Richard felt the weight of that revelation settle over him like a shroud. How many people are connected to you? Hundreds, Tommy whispered. Men, women, children, all living borrowed time because of what I've done. And with each healing, I lose a little more of myself. Soon there won't be any Tommy left, just a collective of everyone I've ever saved. The room fell silent, except for the ticking of Richard's antique clock. Finally, Dr. Walsh spoke. There has to be a way to break the connection, some kind of medical intervention, a way to make the healings permanent without the symbiosis. Maybe, Tommy said, his eyes brightening with hope. But it would require resources, research, time, things I don't have, unless... Unless what? Richard prompted. Unless someone with the right resources and the right motivation decided to help me find a way to set everyone free. Richard understood immediately. My pharmaceutical company, my research facilities, Dr. Walsh's expertise in neurology, Tommy added. And most importantly, someone who understands what it means to lose everything and still choose to help others. But why me specifically? Richard asked. Why did you choose me to heal first? Tommy's smile was sad and knowing. Because your sister told me to. The revelation about Emily hit Richard like a physical blow. He gripped the armrests of his wheelchair so tightly his knuckles turned white, his mind reeling with the implications of Tommy's words. My sister is dead, Richard said, his voice barely above a whisper. She died 5 years ago from leukemia. She can't have told you anything. Death isn't the end, Mr. Hawthorne, Tommy replied gently. There's just a different kind of existence. Emily has been watching over you, waiting for the right moment to help you heal. Not just your body, but your spirit. Dr. Walsh looked between them, her scientific training warring with the impossibility of what she was hearing. Tommy, are you saying you can communicate with the dead? I exist in the space between life and death. Sometimes I encounter souls who haven't moved on, who are anchored to this world by unfinished business or unbreakable love. Tommy's eyes grew distant. Emily is one of them. She's been trying to reach you for years, but grief made you close yourself off to any possibility of hope. Richard felt tears he hadn't shed in years beginning to form. What did she tell you? She said you used to be different, before the accident, before the bitterness and isolation. She said you started your pharmaceutical company because you wanted to help people, to prevent other families from going through what you both did. Tommy's voice carried the weight of shared memory. But somewhere along the way you forgot that purpose. You became consumed with success, with building walls around yourself. The accident changed everything, Richard said defensively. The accident was just the final straw, Tommy corrected. Emily says you were already paralyzed in ways that had nothing to do with your spine. The physical paralysis just made it visible. Dr. Walsh set down her tablet, her attention fully focused on the conversation. What does Emily want? She wants Richard to remember who he used to be. She wants him to use his resources to help me find a way to set everyone free. Not just the hundreds of people connected to me, but future generations who might need healing. Tommy struggled to sit up straighter. She says that's the only way both of us can find peace. Richard's mind was racing. My research facilities, my connections in the medical community, I could fund a massive study into your abilities. We could find a way to replicate the healing without the symbiosis. But it would have to be secret, Dr. Walsh added. Project Prometheus would never allow that kind of research to proceed without government oversight. I have resources they don't know about, Richard said, his business mind already formulating plans. Offshore facilities, private laboratories, connections throughout the international medical community. We could set up a research program that operates completely outside government surveillance. Tommy's eyes lit up with hope. You would do that, even knowing the risks. Tommy, you gave me my life back. More than that, you gave me a purpose again. Richard's voice grew stronger with conviction. Emily was right. I had forgotten why I started the company. I let success become more important than service. There's something else, Tommy said, his voice growing urgent. Emily showed me something about your accident. It wasn't random, Mr. Hawthorne. Someone wanted you out of the way. Richard's blood ran cold. What do you mean? Your company was developing a treatment for spinal cord injuries. Someone didn't want that research to continue, so they arranged for your car to be hit by a drunk driver who happened to work for a rival pharmaceutical company. Dr. Walsh gasped. Are you saying Richard was deliberately targeted? The drunk driver was paid to hit your car specifically, Tommy confirmed. But Emily says the person who ordered it is still out there, still trying to prevent advances in healing technology. Richard felt a rage he hadn't experienced in years. Who was it? Someone with connections to Project Prometheus, someone who profits from keeping healing technology under government control. Tommy's voice grew weaker. Emily says they're coming for us, soon. As if summoned by his words, the sound of helicopters filled the air outside Richard's mansion. Through the windows, they could see black aircraft circling the property like mechanical vultures. They found us, Dr. Walsh said, her face pale with fear. Not just them, Tommy said, his eyes wide with alarm. I can feel other presences, other anomalies. Project Prometheus has brought reinforcements. Richard's heart pounded as he realized the scope of what they were facing. How many? 3 others like me. Children who died and came back changed. But these ones, they've been broken by the government's experiments. They're not here to help. The sound of the helicopters grew louder, and through the windows they could see repelling lines being deployed. Agent Reynolds' voice came through a megaphone. Richard Hawthorne, you are harboring a national security threat. Surrender the boy immediately or we will be forced to take him by any means necessary. Tommy struggled to his feet, his small body radiating with golden energy. I won't let them take me. I won't let them turn me into a weapon. You don't have to fight them, Richard said. We can find another way. There is no other way, Tommy replied sadly. This was always how it was going to end. Emily told me that too. The front door of Richard's mansion exploded inward in a shower of splinters and smoke. Through the breach came not just Agent Reynolds and his team, but 3 figures that made Tommy's face go white with terror. They appeared to be children, but their eyes held the same ancient knowledge as Tommy's, except these eyes were filled with madness and rage. Hello, Tommy, said the first, a girl who couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, but her smile was cold and predatory. I'm Rebecca, we've been looking for you. The government didn't just capture us, explained the second, a boy with dark hair and scars covering his arms. They broke us, rebuilt us, made us into what they needed us to be. The third remained silent, but his presence radiated a menace that made the air itself feel heavy and oppressive. Tommy, get behind me, Richard said, moving his wheelchair to shield the boy. That won't help, Rebecca said with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. We know all about your connection to him. We can feel it from here. The golden thread that ties your life to his. Agent Reynolds stepped through the doorway, his weapon drawn. Mr. Hawthorne, Dr. Walsh, step away from the subject. These operatives are here to contain him if he resists. You mean they're here to kill him? Dr. Walsh said, her voice shaking with fury. Only if necessary, Agent Reynolds replied coldly. But Tommy has become too powerful to control through conventional means. We need assets who can operate on his level. Tommy's eyes began to glow with golden light. I won't go with you. I won't let you turn me into one of them. You don't have a choice, the scarred boy said, raising his hand. Immediately, Richard felt intense pain shooting through his spine. We can make his connection to you very unpleasant. Stop, Tommy shouted, his own power flaring in response. Don't hurt him. Then come with us quietly, Rebecca said sweetly, or we'll make sure Mr. Hawthorne experiences every moment of agony we've endured. Dr. Walsh stepped forward, her medical bag in hand. There's something you should know before you take him. Tommy isn't just connected to Richard. He's connected to hundreds of people. If you kill him, you'll be committing mass murder. Agent Reynolds's expression didn't change. We're aware of the collateral damage. It's an acceptable loss. Acceptable? Richard felt rage building inside him. You're talking about hundreds of innocent lives. We're talking about national security, Agent Reynolds replied. The existence of beings like Tommy represents a threat to the established order. They must be contained or eliminated. But as they spoke, Tommy was changing. His form began to shimmer and shift, becoming more translucent. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of hundreds of souls. I won't let you hurt them, he said. But it wasn't just his voice anymore. It was the voice of everyone he'd ever healed, speaking in unison. I won't let you turn me into a weapon. Tommy, no! Dr. Walsh realized what was happening. You're destabilizing the connections. If I'm going to die anyway, I'm going to make sure I set everyone free first, Tommy replied, his form becoming more ghostly by the second. Including you, Mr. Hawthorne. Richard felt the golden thread connecting him to Tommy beginning to fray. His legs started to go numb, his spine beginning to revert to its damaged state. Tommy, don't do this! But Tommy wasn't listening. He was pulling all his scattered energy back into himself, severing the connections that had kept hundreds of people alive. The effort was destroying him, but it was also building towards something unprecedented. He's going to explode, Rebecca said, her madness replaced by genuine fear. All that life force, all those connections, he's turning himself into a bomb. Agent Reynolds spoke rapidly into his radio. All units, fall back. Repeat, all units fall back immediately. But it was too late. Tommy's form blazed with golden light as he prepared to sacrifice himself to prevent his gift from being weaponized. In that moment of crisis, Richard made a decision that would change everything. Tommy, wait, he shouted. I know who ordered my accident. I know who's really behind Project Prometheus. Tommy's form stabilized slightly. What? Dr. Walsh, Richard said, his voice heavy with betrayal and realization. It was you. Dr. Walsh's face went white. Richard, what are you talking about? You were the one who wanted my spinal cord research shut down. You were the one who arranged for the accident. Richard's voice grew stronger as the pieces fell into place. You've been working with them all along. The golden light around Tommy intensified as he processed this revelation. Dr. Walsh, is that true? For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Dr. Walsh's professional mask slipped, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. You were getting too close to a breakthrough, she said quietly. Neural regeneration technology in private hands would have disrupted everything. The government needed to control that research. You destroyed my life, Richard said, his voice filled with pain and anger. I saved the world from chaos, Dr. Walsh replied. Do you have any idea what would happen if healing technology like Tommy's became widely available? The economic disruption, the social upheaval, the potential for misuse. Tommy's form began to solidify again, but now his eyes held a different kind of fury. You've been studying me this whole time, learning my weaknesses. Every test, every scan, every moment of concern, it was all to gather data for them, Dr. Walsh confirmed. I'm sorry, Tommy, I genuinely grew fond of you, but this is bigger than any of us. Agent Reynolds smiled grimly. Thank you, Dr. Walsh. Your intelligence has been invaluable. But Tommy's response was not what anyone expected. Instead of rage or betrayal, he began to laugh, a sound that carried the weight of ancient wisdom and infinite sadness. You made one mistake, he said, his voice now steady and strong. You assumed I was the only one. The air around Tommy shimmered, and suddenly the room was filled with other presences, translucent figures that appeared to be children but radiated the same impossible energy as Tommy. They materialized from nothing, their forms ghostly but unmistakably real. "Meet the others," Tommy said, his voice now carrying absolute authority. "Every child who died but came back changed, every soul who was touched by the same force that created me. We've been waiting for this moment." Richard counted at least 20 figures, all of them children who had died and returned as something more than human. Their eyes held the same ancient wisdom as Tommy's, but unlike the broken ones working for the government, these retained their humanity. "This is impossible," Agent Reynolds said, his weapon wavering as he tried to choose targets. "Our intelligence indicated there were only 5 known anomalies worldwide." "Your intelligence was wrong," said a boy who appeared to be about 10 years old. "We learned to hide from you, to protect ourselves and each other." Rebecca and her companions suddenly looked uncertain. "There are too many of them," the scarred boy said. "We can't contain them all." "You won't contain any of us," Tommy replied. "We're done hiding. We're done being hunted. And we're done letting people like Dr. Walsh decide who lives and who dies." Dr. Walsh backed toward the door, her betrayal complete. "You don't understand what you're doing. This kind of power can't be allowed to exist without oversight." "Then let's show them what oversight looks like," Tommy said. The gathered children joined hands, their forms blazing with golden light. The energy they generated was unlike anything Richard had ever witnessed, not destructive, but transformative. It filled the room like liquid sunshine, and everywhere it touched, change began to occur. Agent Reynolds' weapon simply dissolved in his hands, its metal components breaking down into harmless powder. The helicopter outside the mansion shut down as their electronics failed, forcing the crews to land safely. Even Rebecca and her companions felt the change. Their madness began to fade as the golden light healed the damage that had been done to their minds. "What are you doing?" Dr. Walsh demanded. "We're setting everyone free," Tommy replied. "Every person I've ever healed, every connection I've ever made, they're all independent now. They don't need me to survive anymore." Richard felt the change immediately. The golden thread connecting him to Tommy dissolved, but instead of losing his mobility, he felt his spine fully heal. The regeneration was complete, permanent, and entirely his own. "But more than that," Tommy continued, "we're making sure this never happens again." The golden light spread beyond the mansion, flowing through the city like a wave of healing energy. Every person touched by it experienced something different. Some were healed of physical ailments, others of emotional wounds, still others of spiritual emptiness. But all of them shared one thing: they were free. "The age of secrets is over," Tommy announced. "Healing won't be controlled by governments or corporations. It will be a gift freely given to all who need it." Agent Reynolds and his team found themselves unable to move, not because of any force holding them, but because they suddenly understood the futility of their mission. Dr. Walsh's betrayal was forgotten in the face of something far greater, the promise of a world where healing was available to all. "What happens now?" Richard asked, marveling at his completely restored mobility. "Now we teach," Tommy replied, his form beginning to fade as his purpose was fulfilled. "We teach others to heal without cost, to help without strings attached, to love without condition." "Are you leaving?" Richard asked, surprised by how much the thought hurt. "I'm not leaving," Tommy smiled. "I'm just changing. We all are. The boundary between life and death, between possible and impossible, it's dissolving. And in its place, something better is being born." As Tommy spoke, his form became more translucent, but his presence somehow grew stronger. Around him, the other children began to fade as well, their mission complete. "Remember us?" Tommy said, his voice now seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Remember what we've shown you. And help others remember too." The golden light reached its peak intensity, then gradually faded, leaving behind a world fundamentally changed. The mansion was quiet, Agent Reynolds and his team gone. Dr. Walsh vanished, and Richard alone with the knowledge that everything he thought he knew about life, death, and healing had been transformed forever. But he wasn't truly alone. In the silence, he could hear his sister's voice, finally at peace. Well done, brother. Well done. The real work was just beginning. 6 months after the world changed forever, Richard Hawthorne stood in the lobby of the newly constructed Healing Center in downtown Austin. The building's glass walls reflected the morning sun, but more importantly, they reflected the faces of people who had come from around the world seeking something that had once been impossible: free, accessible healing for everyone who needed it. The transformation hadn't been immediate or easy. In the days following Tommy's revelation, governments worldwide had scrambled to understand what had happened. The golden wave of healing energy had touched every continent, fundamentally altering the relationship between medicine and miracle, between science and spirit. Project Prometheus had been disbanded overnight. Its operatives either disappeared or reassigned to less sinister duties. Richard walked through the center's corridors, his steps confident and sure. His legs were completely healed now, stronger than they'd been even before the accident. But more than his physical restoration, he felt a renewal of purpose that had been missing from his life for years. Mr. Hawthorne called Dr. Sarah Martinez, the center's head researcher. She was young, brilliant, and untainted by the corruption that had infected institutions like Project Prometheus. The latest test results are extraordinary. We've successfully replicated the healing process in a laboratory setting. Richard joined her at a viewing window that looked into one of the research labs. Inside, volunteers worked with patients who had previously been considered hopeless cases: paralyzed veterans, children with terminal illnesses, elderly people whose bodies had been ravaged by age and disease. But what they were witnessing wasn't just medical treatment. It was something far more profound. "The healers aren't using any external energy source," Dr. Martinez explained. "They're somehow tapping into the same force that Tommy accessed, but without the symbiotic connection. It's as if his sacrifice opened a door that can't be closed." Richard watched a young woman place her hands on a man's withered legs, her face serene with concentration. Within minutes, the man was standing, tears streaming down his face, as he took his first steps in 20 years. But the woman who had healed him showed no signs of the exhaustion that had plagued Tommy. She was energized, glowing with health and vitality. "How many healing centers are operational now?" Richard asked. 237 worldwide, with more opening every day," Dr. Martinez replied. "The knowledge spreads naturally. People who've been healed often discover they can heal others. It's like a virus, but one that spreads hope instead of disease." Richard's phone buzzed with a message from Marcus, his former driver who now managed the center's transportation services. "Mr. Hawthorne, there's someone here to see you. She says it's about Tommy." Curious, Richard made his way to the main entrance where he found an elderly woman waiting. She was small and frail, but her eyes held a strength that reminded him of someone he'd known. "Mr. Hawthorne," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent. "My name is Elena Chen. I was Tommy's grandmother." Richard's heart skipped a beat. "Mrs. Chen, I'm so sorry for your loss. Tommy was extraordinary. He saved my life." "He saved many lives," Elena replied, "but I didn't come here to grieve. I came to give you something." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small wooden box, its surface worn smooth by countless hands. "Tommy left this for you. He said you would understand what to do with it when the time was right." Richard accepted the box with trembling hands. It was surprisingly warm, and he could feel a faint vibration emanating from within. "What is it?" "A piece of his essence," Elena explained. "Not the healing power, that belongs to the world now. But his memories, his knowledge, his understanding of what he was and what he represented. He said you would need it to guide the centers, to make sure the healing is never again used for the wrong purposes." Richard opened the box carefully. Inside was a small crystal that pulsed with gentle golden light. The moment he touched it, he was flooded with visions. Not painful like Tommy's absorption of other people's memories, but gentle, instructive. He saw the network of healing centers as Tommy had envisioned them, not as businesses or government operations, but as sanctuaries where human compassion could flourish. "There's something else," Elena said softly. "Tommy wanted me to tell you that Emily is at peace now. She's moved on to whatever comes next, but she's grateful for what you've done." Richard felt tears he hadn't realized were falling. "I still miss her." "Of course you do. But she's part of something larger now, just like Tommy. They're not gone. They're just expanded. Over the following weeks, Richard found himself understanding the crystal's guidance more deeply. He restructured his entire pharmaceutical empire, transforming it from a profit-driven corporation into a global foundation dedicated to supporting the healing centers. The crystal's visions showed him how to identify potential healers, how to train them safely, and most importantly, how to ensure that the gift would never again be corrupted by those who would exploit it. The world was changing in ways both subtle and profound. Hospital systems adapted to accommodate the new reality, with traditional medicine working alongside the mysterious healing gift. Pharmaceutical companies shifted their focus from treating symptoms to preventing disease. Mental health improved globally as people found purpose in helping others heal. But perhaps the most significant change was in the relationship between science and spirituality. The rigid boundaries that had separated them for centuries began to dissolve, replaced by a more holistic understanding of human potential. Universities established new departments studying the intersection of consciousness and healing. Religious leaders of all faiths found common ground in the universal nature of compassion. Richard often returned to the spot where Tommy's lemonade stand had been. The oak tree was still there, but now it was surrounded by a small garden maintained by neighborhood volunteers. A simple plaque read, "In memory of Tommy Chen, who taught us that healing is love made visible." On this particular evening, as autumn painted the leaves in shades of gold, Richard sat on a bench beneath the tree. The crystal in his pocket pulsed gently, and he felt a familiar presence. "You did well," Tommy's voice seemed to whisper on the wind. "The centers are everything I hoped they would be." "I had a good teacher," Richard replied aloud, not caring if anyone heard him talking to empty air. "You were always meant to do this work," Tommy continued. "Emily knew it even when you forgot. Sometimes we have to lose everything to remember who we really are." Richard smiled, thinking of his sister. She would have loved to see this. "She does see it," Tommy assured him. "We all do. The boundary between life and death isn't as solid as people think. Love transcends it, purpose transcends it, and healing, true healing, transcends it most of all." A young mother pushing a stroller stopped at the garden, her child reaching for the colorful flowers. The woman looked tired, worn down by the struggles of daily life. Without thinking, Richard approached her. "Beautiful evening," he said gently. She smiled, but he could see the exhaustion in her eyes. "It is. My daughter loves flowers, so we come here often." "Are you okay?" Richard asked, the crystal's guidance making him more sensitive to others' pain. The woman's composure cracked slightly. "My husband is sick. The doctors say there's nothing they can do. I've heard about the healing centers, but the waiting list is so long." Richard felt the crystal's warmth intensify. "What's his name?" David Patterson." "Mrs. Patterson, I think I can help." Richard pulled out his phone and made a call. "Dr. Martinez, I need you to prioritize someone for tomorrow morning." "David Patterson, yes, I'll take full responsibility." When he hung up, Mrs. Patterson was staring at him with hope and disbelief. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" "Because a very wise child once taught me that healing is never about the healer," Richard replied. "It's about recognizing that we're all connected, that when one person suffers, we all suffer, and when one person heals, we all heal." As the sun set over Austin, Richard felt a profound sense of completion. Tommy's gift had spread far beyond what anyone could have imagined. The healing centers were just the beginning. Already, people were discovering they could heal emotional wounds, mend broken relationships, and restore hope to communities that had lost it. The world wasn't perfect, but it was better. And in a small lemonade stand's legacy, Richard had found not just his own healing, but a way to help heal the world. The crystal in his pocket pulsed one final time, and he heard Tommy's voice, fainter now, but filled with joy. "Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne. Thank you for remembering what love can do." Richard stood up, his legs strong and sure, and walked home through streets filled with people who carried hope in their hearts, hope that had been born from the belief that miracles were not only possible, but inevitable when compassion guided the way. The age of healing had truly begun.